So we're gonna pick up from where Deanna dies. She dies, and we have her funeral. A very moving moment in my life. Not a lot of support, but we got through it. We got through it. And so after she dies, child support calls me to move forward with the child support case, simply because a lot of money had been spent on that hospitalization when she was born so early. So Medicaid wanted to get their money. And so one of the ways to do that was they came back through child support in order to recoup that money. So if you can remember, I told you that when she passed away, I requested from the medical examiner's office to keep some of her blood because I just knew, old boy was going to say, I'm not her father. You can't prove it. So we go um, to the child support office. He and I are sitting out in the lobby. We are very cordial with one another. He's talking, I'm talking, and he was like, "Well, Sel, I'm going to tell them that I'm her father, so I can sign off on it, and we can just get this done." And I was cool with that. That's all I wanted. But oh no, we talk. He goes and he sits with some other people that were sitting in the lobby. He kind of shares the story that he had a baby from this lady. She's here trying to come after him for child support. They gave him the wise wisdom to say, "Hey man, tell him that wasn't your baby. There's nothing that they could do. The baby is dead. They're not going to exhume her body just to test to make sure that you are the father." So he took their advice. We got in front of the judge or the attorney at that time who was working on the case, and he says, that wasn't my baby. I'm not the father, therefore I'm not signing anything. And my mouth hit the floor. So the attorney or the judge, I can't remember which one it was, said, "Oh, well, Mr. So and so, it's okay. Miss Covert actually had the medical examiner's office to keep a vial of the baby's blood, so we have it, so we can indeed move forward with testing today." His mouth hit the floor. And I was between being angry and I was between being joyous because you thought you had somebody. You thought you was going to play with me. Play with me, boo-boo. Play with me. So indeed, we went forward and we had the test. It came up and it proved that he was the father. So a little time elapsed, and guess what I did? I went back again. Allowed him back into my life one more again. And so throughout that time, he was helpful in a way because I really couldn't express my grief to other people. I felt like other people could not understand. And so since he was her father, I began to share with him some of the things that I was going through. And for the most part, he was supportive. But the biggest point that happened in my life and the biggest turning point was almost 2 years after her death. I was sitting at Mott's Tire and Brake in Gainesville, Florida on 13th Street, and I was sitting on the curb and I was waiting to get my car serviced. As I was sitting on the curb, this man parked right in front of me, and I'm like, "What's up, dude?" But I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking in my mind, all these parking spaces and you choose to park in front, you choose to park where I'm sitting on the curb. So he goes in and he comes out and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I park in front of you?" I had an attitude. I was like, "Yep, you sure did." So he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I'm so sorry." And then he says, "You're angry with God." And I was like, "Yeah, I sure am. I sure am." And he was like, "Why?" I said, "Because he took my baby from me. He took my baby from me. And it makes no sense to go through all the things that I went through in the NI and then you just take her from me. And it's supposed to be okay." So he began to share a story with me of what he had experienced. And so he was a pastor, he was sharing, and he had a son who was an addict. And over the years, his son had managed to steal and take from the family. Him and his wife, his sister, he just stole from anybody that he was around. And so it got to the point where the family basically banished the boy from their homes. He was not allowed to come around because he was such a thief. And so this man began to tell me that his son got sick. I think he was found on the streets and somebody took him to the hospital. So, of course, family was notified that he was in the hospital, and that they needed to come. Well, they did some testing and it turned out that the young guy had cancer. So they took him from Northeast, they took him from North Florida and took him to Shands. And so they opened him up, and it appeared that he had a tumor in his stomach that, in the initial stages, it was the size of a small orange, but when they went back to Shands, it actually became the size of a cantaloupe that was in his stomach. And so they told him that there was nothing that they could do for him, and that this was it. So the family had to decide at that point, what did they want to do? Well, the sister had had enough. Her brother had done enough damage. She did not want him at the home any longer. So the dad took him in. The dad and his mom took him in. And so during this time, the father said his son began to apologize for all the wrong deeds that he had done towards the family, and he was very apologetic, very godly sorrowful for what he had done. And so this man began to talk about how much time him and his son talked, and they shared about good times, they shared about difficult times, and the father was also able to acknowledge some of the things that he had done wrong as his father to his child. So one night the father said he heard his son just crying, and so he went and he stood to the door. He cracked the door, and his son was on his knees, asking God to forgive him for all he done, and he asked God to save him. He asked God to save him. And the father overheard this. It was in the middle of the night. Within the next couple days, his son passed away. His son passed away. So this man was telling me that he too was angry with God. And he began to tell the father, how could you take away my son? He was finally saved. He was the son that I always wanted, a son of faith, a son of great magnitude, and you took him from me. So he said, I was angry with the Lord myself. He said it took a little bit of time, and he asked the Lord, why did you take my son from me? Why did you take my son? When the Lord felt that he was ready to hear and listen, he said the Lord spoke to him and told him, had I not taken your son, you would never see him again. He would be in hell. So this sickness came about to bring him back, not only to you, but to me. So you got an opportunity to hear him say, forgive me, Father. You heard him for yourself. So I want you to know that he's here with me. And if you live right, you will see him again. This man began to say, he began to tell me, he said, people will tell you not to question God. He said, but it is the way in which you approach God that makes the difference. He reminded me that in scripture, when Jesus knew that he was going to go to the cross and that time was coming near, Jesus asked his Father, why hast thou forsaken me? Why hast thou forsaken me? So he said, if Jesus, your Father, he said, my Father, if he could ask his Father, whom he is in relationship with and whom we are supposed to be in relationship with, why can't we ask our Father? It is the way in which you approach the throne. It is a way in which you approach your Father to get a response. And he said, ask God your Father why he took her. And I promise you, he will give you an answer when you are ready and open to receive it.